theory. And so for the since last week, we have been looking at different theories. We have been looking at different theories that seeks to explain our Caribbean society and culture. First, we look at plural society, then we look at plantation society and economy. And under that, we look at social stratification. And today we are going to look at creolization, which is another view on the Caribbean. All right, so creolization. So we're going to start with this scholar by the name of Richard Adams. And in 1957, he studied American society. And he looked at the slave societies in North America, not only the slave society, but just look at the cultures in North America generally, right? That emerged on slave plantation. And he used the concept of Creole culture, which actually means, according to Adams, any culture that emerged in the New World or the Americas, right? So once a culture emerged in the New World or in the Americas, he considered that to be a Creole culture. Now, Cameron Brathwaite, a Barbadian scholar, he used to lecture at the University of the West Indies. He died earlier this year. And Brathwaite borrowed the concept of Creole culture from Richard Adams, and he created a theory that is called creolization. And this was and he actually applied it to the Caribbean. Now, for Brathwaite, he studied, he was a historian, he's a point, he did quite a lot of things, and very brilliant person. May his soul rest in peace. He studied the Jamaica between 1970 and 1820, and he wrote the book, The Development of a Creole Society in Jamaica, 1770 to 1820. And he mentioned that between 1770 and 1820, Jamaica witnessed the development of a society that contained Black and whites and their colored offspring that created its own distinctive culture. The culture was neither British nor African, but rather Creole. So according to him, on the slave plantation in Jamaica, where you had the Africans and the Europeans, they lived together with their offspring, which is their colored offspring, the mix between black and white. And that created a new culture. For him, the culture was neither British, that means it was not a British culture, it was not an African culture, but he calls it a Creole culture. And for him, he said that in the process of creating that Creole culture, there are going to be some obstacles for both whites and blacks. And so the white had to deal with the problem of being both British and Jamaican, Creole and colonial, while the Africans face the same dilemma of trying to identify or remember their African culture while coming to terms with being a slave. And so there are obstacles in the process of creolization that both Africans went through and also the British went through. Now, the concept of creolization was created as a critique of M.G. Smith's plural theory, because for Brathwaite, Jamaica was not a plural society, but a Creole society where the cultures mixed together to form this unique group. Now, the thing that we need to know is that for Brathwaite, in looking at creolization, it was in reference to Black Africans and Europeans. So Africans and Europeans created that unique culture. No, he did not include in his analysis Indians, indigenous peoples, other groups, ethnic groups, such as the Jewish people who lived in Jamaica during the period. It was mainly Africans and Europeans. However, scholars over a period of time have included all the different groups in the concept of creolization. Now, there are three terms that we need to come to grip with: hybridization, syncretism, and creolization. For hybridization, this is really a Western concept, where if you want to talk about cultural mixing of different groups, or the attempt where you have new cultural forms being created as a result of groups being integrated together, different cultures being integrated together, for quite a lot of scholars, especially in Europe and in North America, they use the term hybridization. We also borrow the term to use in the Caribbean, and we also use the term syncretism or syncretization, which is the same concept. All three of them dealing with mixing. However, Brathwaite created this concept of creolization in reference to the cultural mixture that took place in the Caribbean, or in particular Jamaica at the time. So creolization is really used in relation to the Caribbean. It's not used, it is not used for mixing, for example, cultural mixing in maybe Canada or Europe or the United States or even Brazil. They would consider that as being hybridization, although all of them is saying the same thing. The only thing is that you use creolization only in reference to the Caribbean. You can use creolization for the Caribbean, hybridization for the Caribbean, syncretism for the Caribbean. But creolization is only used in reference to the Caribbean. I've seen scholars now applying the concept of creolization to North American societies. Key terms. There are 4 key terms that we need to know during this the process of creolization: enculturation, acculturation, interculturation, and also assimilation. So someone, could you read enculturation for me, please?
Process of socialization whereby one learns and absorbs one's own culture or becomes part of another culture.
All right, thank you very much. So enculturation is where you actually learn somebody's culture. Uh, Not really you learn somebody's, but you absorb your own culture while becoming a part of another culture. So it is really the process of learning of cultures, right? So if you are in a particular space, Like the enslaved people and the African, well, the enslaved people and the European, they are learning about the European culture while becoming a part of another culture, right? The same thing for the Europeans. They are learning about the Africans while becoming a part of uh, learn absorbing their own culture while learning to become a part of the African culture. And so it is between this process where both groups are learning of their, absorbing their own culture and becoming a part of another culture that you have the mixing of cultures taking place. Acculturation. Somebody please read it for me, please.
Sir, I can read it.
Thank you very much.
Enculturation. The changes identified in a group of people as a result of the merging of cultures caused by living in a shared community over time. It usually involves the dominance of one culture over the other or others. In the Caribbean, it has been used specifically to distinguish the absorption of foreign cultural traits into Creole society.
All right, so acculturation here, during the process of acculturation, thank you very much. Uh, we, while each other is learning about each, absorbing their culture and learning to be part of another culture, acculturation uh, is, is within that process of learning or the absorption of your own culture, there's going to be one culture that is very dominant, right? And so you're going to find the dominance of one culture uh, in the mixture. So within this space where you have the Africans and Europeans on slave plantation, both cultures mixing, there's going to be a dominant culture that is going to be there. Or one of the cultural groups is going to have more element in the new culture that is being formed. All right? Assimilation. Reader, please.
The process through which a dominant culture is accepted by different groups in a society. The dominant culture is usually the result of the merging of different cultures within the society.
All right, thank you very much. So during the process of assimilation, while on the slave plantation, Africans and Europeans learn from each other, right? Their cultures. Please note that it has the term creolization has now expanded, so it is all the different groups learning each other's culture. Acculturation is over a period of time you realize that even though the cultures have mixed, there's one culture that tends to be dominant within all the different mixtures. And assimilation is everybody in that society accepting that the dominant culture is either European or the dominant culture is either African culture, right? And interculturation is basically that process that involves the mixing of the different groups or the different cultures that are taking place. Now, if we look at an example of baking a chocolate cake, you have eggs, you have chocolate, you have flour, sugar, butter, spices. So we could say the eggs are the European, the chocolate, the indigenous people, the flour, the Africans, the sugar, the Chinese, butter, spices, the Indians. And so you're baking your chocolate cake here. Now, the process in which you mix everything together. So you have the flour, the sugar, the butter, all of these stuff. Eggs represent different peoples that come into the Caribbean to live over a period of time. And so you're mixing all of these different things together to create your cake. The movement of the hand in the bowl, we would consider that to be interculturation, or which is caused by migration. So migration actually, all of these groups coming together, migrating to the region, and you're mixing. So that is the interculturation, the the mixing of the different groups within the society. Now, enculturation is that once you mix these together, first of all, if you when you know, for those of you bake, you realize that is the sugar, you have to put the sugar and the butter together, and you beat it together, beat it around to ensure that it's smooth and stuff. During that process, the sugar has to dissolve. Same thing with the egg and this and the flour, everything have to dissolve. So in all of this, they are absorbing each other ingredients. They are absorbing it. Each of the ingredients absorbing each other. Yes, for you to have that mixture, you absorb each other here, or you're basically learning about their own culture. So the flour, while at the same time absorbing its own culture as being the flour is also learning from the egg, because it is mixing the egg and also the butter and also, what you call this, the chocolate, because they realize that they have to coexist or exist within the same space. While the flour, being the part of the cake or the mixture that is dominant, because it is the flour that is going to hold everything together, you would consider the flour to be the process of acculturation. And assimilation now is when everybody in this group, the eggs, the flour, the chocolate, recognize that, listen, without the flour, we wouldn't have a cake. It's the flour that binds everything together. It is the dominant culture here, right? And so assimilation is everybody accepting that this is the dominant culture. That was that is the dominant element that is present in the Creole culture. Now, at the end result, we have a cake, a chocolate cake, which is which is uh, was created as a result of us baking. And so the baking now of the cake is the process of creolization, that mixing, that overall mixing for everything to come together. So this now is a Creole cake. Now, during the process, ladies, of creolization, we have enculturation taking place, which is, as I said, one culture, you absorbing your own culture, while at the same time of you absorbing your own culture, you are recognizing, learning about the other cultures while this mixing is taking place. There are three things that is going to happen while enculturation is taking place. Some cultures are going to be erased, you're going to retain, and once you recognize that your culture has been erased, you're going to try to renew your culture. And so cultural retention is when different groups retain their culture. So even though the you're in a process of creolization, or you're in a Creole society, the mere fact that you have Indian culture being retained, African culture, European culture, indigenous people's culture being retained, at the end of the day, you know for sure that there's some retention of culture or preservation of different aspects of culture. And cultural retention does not need to survive in its original form or intact. So it can just have a resemblance of it. Some examples of retention include our cooking, some of our food, our skills, our recreation. For Africans, the religion, different religious groups, different festivals, dress, folklore, language. Again, remember, uh, Brathwaite did not include other groups like the Indians and the indigenous peoples and also the Chinese. However, scholars today have included them. So what are different elements that the Chinese, the Indians, and the Chinese Indians and the indigenous people would have retained today? So also you need to look at that. What are some of the European cultures that we have retained and also some of the indigenous cultures that have been retained? Within the process of creolization, there are some cultures that are going to die out, or some cultural practices are that going to uh, erase, right? And so, for example, for Africans, we have things like our language, our names have been erased, some of our religions have been erased. Uh, Same thing for the indigenous people, that you have that Indians are the same, that you have some form of erasure. So maybe some things that we used to do, you don't do it anymore. Or we can look at cultural erasure from the point of view of US, the United States, uh, infiltrating our culture. And so some of our traditional Caribbean cultural traits have completely been erased, right? For example, today a lot of people in the Caribbean, well, not a lot, but you have some Caribbean countries doing Thanksgiving. Here, the other day with Halloween, you have Halloween, and then this Friday, you have Black Friday sale. So some of our own cultural elements have been erased because we're adopting other cultures. We, especially when it comes to things like our breakfast, some of the different food, we tend to be very fast food now, where we eat quite a lot of fast food instead of our traditional breakfast or lunch or dinner, right? You can imagine right now in KFC on a Sunday, back in Jamaica, you don't find people go to KFC on a Sunday. Everybody ensure that they cook the good meal and things like that. Right now, you drive past a KFC on a Sunday, the line is extremely long. That sitting together as a family and eating is not being practiced as before. And also, there are some cultures that are renewed. So while you recognize that some of the cultures have been erased, you're going to try to renew your culture. So for example, renewal of culture, cultural renewal involves to return, to discover, to refresh your culture that have been forgotten, suppressed, or ignored. So for example, on the slave plantation, some of our culture that have been erased here is, for example, like beating, suppressed is the beating of drum. Right now, they can't stop us when it comes to playing our drums, right? But, and the mere fact that we have quite a lot of uh, these groups that play drum is part of our African dance troops and all of these different stuff. It's part of our cultural renewal. In Dominican St. Lucia, they have a day that is called Creole Day in October, and it's a day that shows the culture of African people. We have the people, Garveyism by Marcus Garvey, that help us to rediscover and renew our culture. So Garvey said, listen, where's the black man's government? Where is his king? What about his culture? What about his religion? Uh, you need to have some level of pride as black people. Don't worry about them telling you that your hair is nappy and your hair is bad. What he's saying here is that let us have a love for Africa and where we are from. Same thing with the Indians. There's this renewal when it comes to people in Indo-Caribbean. When it comes to India, they try to rediscover Indian, the different aspect of their Indian culture uh, that have been erased while they are living in the Caribbean. Another group is the Rastafarians, who have also contributed to us rediscovering our culture through their music, through their different practices and their emphasis on Africa, and also through the Bob Marley and the different musicians also points us and said, listen, everybody is saying that this is England is our mother country. No, our mother country is not England. Our motherland is in Africa. And so let us cut out this thing about mother country. Let us focus on the motherland, which is Africa. And for the Indian, your motherland is India. For the Chinese, it's China. But we need to focus on our origin, where we are from. So right now, when it comes to cultural renewal, a lot of people wear there's a thing now with people wearing their natural hair to showcase their African pride, wearing a lot of African clothes, wearing some form of emblems of African, either the jewelry, all of these different stuff. And one of the biggest example of cultural renewal that happens recently was through the Black Panther movie. Even people who consider themselves said, listen, I'm not African. Everybody wearing African clothes, and they're going to move it to showcase African. Even if it's for a day, you try to pretend to be African, or just to say that, acknowledge that you're African. Black Panthers done a very good thing in allowing some black people who said, no, I'm not African. And if you're not African, are you a Chinese? Are you an Indian? You ever hear the Indians say that they are not Indian? You ever hear the Chinese say that they are not Chinese, or the whites say that they are not white? Only black people alone say that they are not Africans. And so, on that note, Black Panther has done very well for Afro-Caribbean people, in the sense that even if it was for the hype, everybody put on some African wear and they go on to movie, take picture, and then put on their social media. Indigenous groups have also tried to return to their original culture by the preservation of their artifacts and historical sites. And in places like Belize, there's a day that is called Garifuna Day that celebrates the Garifuna heritage. And so these are the different ways in which we have cultural renewal. So always remember that there's cultural retention, cultural erasure, and cultural renewal. And in the process of creolization, you have enculturation, acculturation, assimilation, and interculturation. Any questions, any comments? No question, no comments. All right, ladies, that's it. We are now through with creolization. When we meet again in January, we're going to do some activities on creolization, social stratification, and plantation society and economy, while we move into the other topics. So when we return in January, we're going to look at geographical phenomena, and after geographical phenomena, we're going to look at that social institution, the different institutions in the Caribbean, and then art forms. So we should finish module 1 by the end of January without any interruption. All right, ladies, enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
Same
sir.
to
Thank you,
you.
sir. Same to you.